Fast forward a couple years, I was like, oh, $300. Oh, that's a lot.
Or you can do everything all over again.
Oh my God.
For real?
Yeah. Step number one, you smell the shoe. Hey, is this new, right? Like if you've worn it, then there's different smell.
Where are they now?
Data privacy.
We do that. What's your reason to join this community? And what is 不知道? What is,
When you're hiring for startups, you should really think about people who are jack of all trades, but like master of one. It's fine.
Okay, so hello everyone. Today I'm happy to have Daniel with me. So Daniel, how are you?
I'm doing well.
So tell us a little bit about you. Who is Daniel?
Yeah. So professionally, I am the CTO for Legitimate. It's a company that does blockchain connected, NFT plus NFC tags. We are like an end-to-end platform for creating phygital goods. So phygital is the word physical plus digital. In my spare time, I guess I helped put together Taipei Blockchain Week. I'm part of 不知道. This is why I'm here in Taiwan with KT. I live in Los Angeles part of the year and Taiwan for the other part of the year currently. And I think in terms of my identity, it's a little bit mixed, but I do identify as, Chinese American, but I am born in Denmark. I have lived in China for also a couple years. So there's like a third culture kid, multicultural aspect of me as well. We can dive into after.
Cool, thanks. And about Legitimate, let's start from there, yeah? So recently you have a really big collab with another company like Puma. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we did a collaboration with Puma and Rock Nation that released this summer. It was a collection of 16,500 sneakers, and they all have the legit tags embedded in them. The special thing about these sneakers are that Rock Nation recorded a special mixtape just for the sneaker collaboration. And what they used Legitimate for was connecting the digital content to the physical sneakers, right? So when you buy the shoe, you can tap the legit tag with your phone and it would pop up the digital experience, which includes that mixtape. So what we also did was every single week during that summer, we would add new content to it. New mixtape tracks get dropped, documentaries, trailers, even like the behind the scenes videos, right? So I think like some of the artists, they wanted to play around with, how this technology is. There were some like blooper reels and like, in-store activations that they did like a kind of cool content around.
And can the artists upload the content by themselves or they have to do it for you?
So we usually handle most of the technology side because, artists, they're great at doing art and they probably don't want to be involved in technology, right? So we come in as almost like a technology provider plus the hardware provider, plus sometimes even the ideation, like what is possible with that technology platform. And sometimes, the artists and Rock Nation and even Puma don't really know, right? And we're so early in this like phygital space where there's not really that many examples of these products. So I think, Balenciaga just released that one jacket where they also did the same thing. They added some tracks onto an NFC tag. I think, Nike Artifact, right? Yeah. They connect an NFT with their shoe. There's an NFC tag in that shoe. And then there's like a lot of these smaller companies that also insert it for like authenticity reasons, right? Mm-hmm. I think with authenticity, it's a little bit harder to sell as a product because companies want to be cool, they want to be innovative. Adding a tag just for that specific purpose, it isn't as cool as like, hey, a fresh new design or whatever. Yeah. And sometimes the economics also don't work, right? They're incentivized to sell more and to sell, new things. Whereas the resale, where the value of the authenticity is in the resale market, they don't capture that value, right?
Yeah, crazy. Okay, so like talking about tag, and you're a CTO of the company / co-founder, I would like to ask you what kind of tech you're using for this collaboration.
This collaboration, the provenance history, so the ownership history of the shoe, say like, I sold the shoe to you, there should be like a, traceability aspect of like, hey, it was owned by Daniel, and now it's owned by, KT, right? This is powered by the blockchain, so we do use Avalanche for that. Yeah, so Avalanche is one of many, I guess, blockchains, right? We specifically choose what we call Ethereum compatible blockchains, the blockchains that run the same code as Ethereum, which is one of the first blockchains where people can do computation in a decentralized and distributed way. Ethereum was, launched 2016, 2017-ish. Avalanche, I think, came in about 2019, 2020. And many of these blockchains, they have their own differentiator, right? With Avalanche, the processing speed is really fast. And also their reliability is really good. You also have, for example, like Polygon, right? Their transaction costs are really low. So that's their differentiator, right? And then you have a lot of these other chains where okay, we're a chain for art. Oh, okay, we're a chain for DeFi, or we have a very engaged community for this aspect of on-chain transactions or data storage. So we chose Avalanche because speed and reliability kind of goes hand in hand with an enterprise deal like Puma and Roc Nation, right? So that is the on-chain and traceability aspect. And then we have the legit platform, which is responsible for hosting the content, managing all the tags. You imagine, tens of thousands of tags. They are activated individually. And actually what is valuable to Puma and to a lot of these bigger brands is the customer aspect. We capture an email every single time someone activates a tag and views the content. So for most shoes for Puma, and goes for other brands too, is that they're sold through distributors. They don't have the end customer information. They don't know who it goes to. So when we have these tags, we can capture that email. We know who exactly bought however many of that shoe as well. We've seen, people own all three colorways of this Puma shoe. And that's valuable information for Puma to have to market the next time, right? We also have rough geolocation of where that person tapped a tag from their, phone IP address or whatever. So we can say hey, Californians are really into this. Or we've actually seen a couple, so this release is only in the US, right? We've seen a handful of shoes go to the EU. You normally wouldn't find that out unless you find it on a, European resale marketplace or something like that, right? But I think 10, 20 of the shoes went to Europe, got activated in Europe.
Oh, really?
There's a lot that went to Japan and South Korea, and a handful went to Singapore. There's one or two in Taiwan as well. So I think that aspect of understanding where your customers are coming from, who they are, what they own, that is also part of the ecosystem. So it's the content, it's the customer relationship, and it's the provenance and, authenticity verification.
So it sounds like a B2B2C business model also.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you handle this data for Puma too.
Yes.
Amazing. So it's very beneficial for Puma, but I want to know if I'm a buyer of one of this pair of sneaker, what's the customer experience look like for me? What can I expect?
This shoe and this technology, we're really designing for the general customer. They should not be tech savvy. They should not be, a crypto person. They should just understand that hey, this is a website. Here's how I log in. We actually create a, wallet for you with an email so that you can activate the tag and register information on-chain, right? And then once the tag is activated, you just view the content as it is, like a music player, video player, stuff like that, right? Just press play, music comes out. Right?
Wow. You designed the product, entire process, or?
So the legit platform, which hosts a lot of this content, is designed by us. With Roc Nation and with Puma, this one, we involved a couple different creative people, designers to ideate on this entire activation. And then either us or an agency or developer develops the product-specific activation.
And what's your intrinsic motivation to work on this project or co-founded this company? What did you do before that? Yeah,
I think in tech it's very boring, right? You work at an enterprise SaaS company, you work at a consumer tech company. A lot of my friends joke that we get paid a lot of money to redesign a button, to move it around, change the color, all that kind of stuff. I definitely felt that way for the past couple of jobs. So my journey started after college at IBM Watson. I was doing a lot of the prototyping for AI and machine learning. And then I went to Squarespace for about 3.5 years. And I was building the website configuration platform. So anybody who goes to Squarespace to create a website, you probably touched something that I built. I was engineer number 90, I think, and 89. And at that point, there was only about 10, 15 engineers working on that configuration tool. So everyone had a lot of, say and just, impact. I think that's what it is, impact at the end of the day. But as the company grew, everyone's share of the impact becomes smaller. Obviously, the company becomes also more stable and, things aren't on fire all the time, which is great, right? But after 3.5 years, I thought I can, try something different. I was at WeWork for about a year.
Really?
And that was tough times, you know. Like you watch the documentary, it's, you know, it's about 70-80% true.
No way.
Or the show on Hulu, is it? We worked, we something.
Yeah, it's We Work. No, We Work, because I watch it on the Planet, I think. I don't know.
That one, it's very interesting. And after that, I went to this sneaker resale platform called goat.com. I think that was where I learned a lot of the mechanics of like how resale works. People really aren't interested in like, say, reusing a pair of sneakers. Most people buy sneakers to collect so they can, you know, like get the value of and say like, hey, I own this rare one, right? And then like the warehousing of these shoes, the authenticity verification, right? That was a crazy part. Like they smell the shoe. That's step number one.
No, for real?
Yeah.
Not some fetish, okay.
Yeah, like so step number one, you smell the shoe. Hey, is this new, right? Like if you've worn it, then there's different smell. Or like if it's a fake, sometimes it smells a little bit more like chemically or like very harsh. And then they also have like guidelines for like say Adidas or Nike on what to look for in a counterfeit. Obviously, like some of these shoes, the counterfeits are getting better and better and better, and that it's like really, really hard these days to find. And I think that's where the solution of this NFC tag comes in. With legitimate, our tags are programmed individually, and it's a next generation tag where every single time you tap the tag, it generates a new signature, and Legitimate's platform verifies that signature and invalidates it so that it can only be used once to do the verification. So you only have one of these chips, right? People always ask me like, okay, what if I rip this out, put it in another pair of shoes? But it's like, hey, you destroy your old pair, like I guess you can do whatever you want, right? So I think like that's kind of where I thought my friend's, you know, startup was pretty innovative, right? At the time, like this is one of my closest friends from college. We went to UCLA together. We went to a lot of these hackathons. He actually tried to get me into this company very early on.
Oh, really?
At the time, like I was working at a cushy job at Squarespace. I got home at 5 p.m., you know, unlimited vacation days. I definitely took like at least 4 or 5 weeks a year at that point. And I was like not really ready to like go broke and like, you know, do a startup. And then during COVID, I kind of had this like revelation, like, okay, you know, what am I doing with my life? I had this point where I was redoing the checkout flow for goat.com for the second time. And I was like, oh my God. You know?
I'm wasting my life here.
I memorized the Stripe API like front and back because I've done, goat.com also owns Flight Club. It's 2 separate web properties, right? I did the checkout for Flight Club and they're like, oh, you're so good at this. Why don't you do it again? If any of my managers watch it, I love all of you. I understand, right? but I think like that was the kind of revelation where I was like, maybe I should have different experience, right? Like, what if I try a very, very small startup where I can have meaningful impact? Like, start from zero, right? I think that's where Legitimate really was. It wasn't at zero when I joined. My friend was at it for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And he like built this relationship up with Alexander John, who is the designer for that shoe. AJ goes by Alexander John professionally, but AJ is also a good friend of Calvin and ours, right? He's been supportive from us since day one. So we did like a very small collaboration with him early on. It was like, you know, the Overwatch League. It's like a pretty popular video game. They have like esports leagues, like people competing, you know, it's like NBA, but for playing games. And the prize was custom sneakers that were designed by AJ. And it had a tag in it. And then AJ also had a ton of these like behind the scenes content of like him producing the shoes, him introducing his like vision of went into this design. I thought that was like super cool. And then we fast forward about 1 year, AJ was in contact with Puma about doing something for like the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Oh, this could be big. This is like a good technology demonstration for what this tech platform could do. If you have music, if you have digital content, you usually wouldn't sell it with a pair of shoes. Or if you do, it would be like a very disconnected experience. Maybe you give a scratch off card, you like redeem like on a website or something like that. Or like you can ship them a CD or something, I don't know. We want to reimagine what a mixtape and CDs, MP3s, content in regards to sneakers. So the sneaker collection was a looking back on the last 30 years. So we started with the mixtape, like a cassette tape. That was the design of the shoe. You had like, elements of the, spinning wheels and like the, iconography. The next shoe in that collection is a CD. It had like the whole like play button, like the fast forward and, skip, anti-skip was a thing.
I don't know what is that, honestly.
So like, when you go running, like your spinning CD would skip if like you shake it too hard.
Have you done that before when you were a child? CD players?
I vividly remember because I had a shitty CD player and it would skip if you
Okay.
It was like one of the Walkman ones. And then like the next one was the MP3, which was like a, digital player, right? So we distilled those concepts into a digital experience where like, hey, you can press play in the digital for the tape, CD, and MP3 player, and they would mimic a MP3 player, CD player, or cassette player in the view. For example, the tape would start spinning when you like play. The CD would have the mixtape CD like start to spin up slowly and then spin down slowly, right? The MP3 had that like the like visualizer thing.
Yeah.
So we put that in there because that was like reminiscence of the early 2000s where like every music player had to like do these like things, right?
Yeah.
So like that whole concept was like AJ, us, and Roc Nation coming together and saying like, hey, we really want to do this. Release this summer. There's still a handful of the shoes left. So like if anyone, watching the podcast wants to pick some up, I'm sure you can find some.
Like firsthand or where? Where are they now?
So Puma used to have them. They're all sold out. Foot Locker may still have some. And then Champ Sports, which is also like a sister store of Foot Locker, might have a couple more. I think they're mostly sold out. Like a lot of the sizes are gone, but if you want to see the product, own a piece of history almost, right?
Cool. Yeah, and also like before you joined Legitimate, were you already in Web3? Did you already, I don't know, were you a crypto kind of, guy?
This makes me really sad. So I mined 10 Bitcoins back very, very early, like 2010, 2011, and I like sold them.
You sold that?
I sold them for like $3. That's the painful part. It was like $3 or $5. It was like, it was each, right? It wasn't a whole lot. At that time, like it was just like a very niche hobby, amateur thing, right? There were like a lot of these online computer forums. I was a nerd. And then like people would like trade, and like they would sell the graphics cards, sell something, and then they want Bitcoin back. And I was just like, oh, I got some, like I'm gonna sell some. Who knows, right? Fast forward a couple years, I was like, oh, $300. Oh, that's a lot, And now we're at like 40K?
Around us, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is, I think back when my friend still founded that company, he was like encouraging everyone. He's like, oh, you guys should probably think about buying some. And I was like, all right, I'll buy like 1 ETH, 2 ETH, right?
Yeah.
Should have bought more. That's what you always say, right?
So like does the entire Web3 blockchain crypto concept attract you, or like how did you?
So I think I look at it from a technology platform perspective. Today, if I were to build a website, or not a website, but maybe I build something in technology, I had to pay Google Cloud, Amazon AWS to, put up a server. It's a very centralized entity that you need to do computation on, right? I think the model of like distributing that computation, putting it on chain so that maybe 100, 1,000, different individuals or entities are verifying that transaction. I think that concept, that novelty, or it's not even novelty because at this point we're looking at like 5, 6, 7 years at this point, right? But I think this shift in computation and transparency, I think is like really interesting to me, right? We used to talk about like open source software. We're like, hey, this piece of software that's running on your phone, on your computer, you can find out what exactly is running on your computer by like looking into the code. Obviously, like most 99% of people won't, but like if you really wanted to make sure that that software is safe, that whatever, you can take a look. I think we're reaching that stage with blockchain. We're like, hey, I don't know what's going on, with a lot of the online data that's being processed, right? But you can see exactly which data is being put in and out on chain, and you can see the code that's being run as well. So in a sense, like for me, having this transparency on the computer like processing side, that's what interested me.
Do you have any personal reason why you think transparency is so interesting to you?
I wouldn't say I'm like a paranoid person, but I'm very particular
He has
about
OCD. Okay.
data privacy.
Okay,
right?
okay,
I don't want my data to be everywhere. I mean, like Facebook and Instagram is a good example, right? Like they're so good at targeting me. Every single time I go a different place, they're like, oh, did you want this jacket? Oh, did you want this new tech? Oh, but I do. You know, right?
Yeah.
I think like if we scale it out even more, like I think the hyper targeting of anything, even in advertising, even in media, right? That's kind of what scares me sometimes. When you're doing things on chain, a lot of this stuff is a lot more transparent, and you have control over what you submit on chain, what you don't submit. If they keep that data, I can see exactly what's being kept.
From your perspective, do you think people undervalue data privacy?
It's a very cultural thing, I think. You know, for example, like Germans, right? They are so big on privacy. Like, I will pay you cash. Like, biggest cash use country in the world. Oh, 1% cash back on my credit card? No. Cash.
Yeah, we do that.
I think like to a certain extent, Japan is like that too, right? But like, if you look at the extreme opposite, like China, where they're just like, okay, everything through WeChat and Alipay, like you can see my entire life spending like here. Yeah. But I guess it's fine because, the government owns my data. For me, like some healthy middle ground of convenience and like privacy, I think is where the sweet spot is. Right?
Talking about cultural, is a cultural issue. Where did you grow up?
It's a very hard question for me to answer because, I consider myself like I've grown up, I've lived in so many different places. My family is from Shanghai. Great-grandfather is from the region outside of Shanghai.
Do you know the name of the...
So my grandma is from Ningbo. My grandpa is from, or his family is from Shaoxing. So it's where the rice wine is from, right? The family moved to Shanghai pretty early, like the early 1900s. That's where I speak full Shanghainese and like,
No, oh my God.
Yeah. So every single time I go back, I try to speak Shanghainese so they don't treat me like a foreigner and like you get privilege. Oh yeah, just skip the line and sit down, have some food, right?
Wait, so you picked it up from your grandparents in Shanghai or?
Yeah, so they used to live with us. So I was born in Denmark, lived there for about 6 years. And I guess my grandparents, they came in, visited us quite often, like every couple months. They would fly from Shanghai to Denmark, take care of us. At the time, my parents, they left China pretty much the first wave of immigration outside of China, right? They went to study in Australia, and then when the Tiananmen thing happened, it's a dangerous time for, Chinese students to even go back. And without a permanent residence, like they had to find a place to stay. So they applied for political asylum. I think Australia granted it to my mom, but not my dad. Denmark gave it to both of them. Germany, I think my dad got. At some point, the UK gave either one or the other or something like that, right? They just decided like, hey, Denmark is, an interesting place. It's pretty progressive and the social safety net is strong. There's a good amount of business opportunity there too because there's not that many Chinese people. And like back then you can like still import things from China to the Denmark and sell and for like have a decent profit because nobody else is doing it. They were also in the food business for a little bit. I think they struggled a lot with the East and West like identity, right? Denmark is a place where you are expected to speak Danish everywhere. And them being Chinese, obviously like their Chinese is way better. But when they're at a supermarket, trying to communicate to each other, like speaking Danish is not their strong suit, right? So a lot of these like little, cultural things made them realize like, hey, maybe this isn't the place for us. And that's when they kind of like looked to my uncle, so my mom's brother, right? He moved to the US and he really liked it, for good reason, right? Like there's such a huge Chinese community in LA. At the time he was in LA and like he helped us, find a place to stay. And he was like, yeah, this place called Alhambra. It's like basically Chinatown, but not really. and then like, it was like a, pretty working class Chinese and Mexican neighborhood. And that was where we first moved to after Denmark. So in between, I spent about 3 years in China. This is where I went to, first and second grade, like learn Chinese. I had the whole young pioneer, the red scarf, right? The CCP party scarf. I learned how to like write the calligraphy with the brush, right?
Yeah.
Then there's like how many poetry, 唐诗300首, right?
Exactly.
Like 300, you have to remember 100 for first grade, 200 for second grade. It is intense, right?
Oh my God.
At that point, like in my life, I didn't really understand why my parents did it. that was a tough life, right?
It is.
Like me moving from Denmark to China and then to the States, I lost 3 groups of friends, right? 2 groups of friends. And I had to like readjust, learn a new language and all of that. In hindsight, like I appreciate having that like multicultural aspect. After we, landed in LA, I spent basically up until college around in Arcadia. It's like also a heavily Asian, neighborhood. Yeah. I think that's where my parents, felt. There's like 3 Chinese grocery stores within 20-minute drives. So they can like pick and choose what they want. Unlike in Denmark, there's 1 or 2. The selection of food is pretty limited, right? In LA, anything you want, really. Yeah. And then I went to UCLA. That's where I met my co-founder. At that time, we loved going to hackathons. I would have never thought that I would found a company with him,
Really?
Like,
so you weren't that entrepreneurial throughout before you joined Legitimate, or?
I think in the back of my head, I was like, it would be interesting to like found a company. But I'm also like, I value, stability and like personal time and like balance of everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm ever that passionate about any one topic that I'm like, wow, I'm gonna spend the next 5 to 10 years of my life working on this exact project. Right? And sometimes like I think I like working on different things too. It's like a little bit more intellectually stimulating, right?
Yeah.
To switch around projects, topics. I sometimes even do BD, right? Because like I think, okay, managing tech is interesting, but sometimes I also want to learn about the business side or I want to learn about the operations side. So, in a startup environment, everyone does everything. I think best advice somebody gave me was like, when you're hiring for startups, you should really think about people who are jack of all trades, but like master of one. So they're really good at one thing, but they can kind of help out with everything and they're willing to do it. That's kind of where my role is. That's where, my co-founder and pretty much everyone at that company at this point.
And are you the only child?
I do have a sister.
You do? And younger?
She is younger. She's like the polar exact opposite of me. I think I'm not the hardest working person at all in the family. She like is great at school, gets good grades. Me in high school and college, I barely got by,
Really?
It was like a miracle that I got into UCLA, I think. And like even now, right? Like she's at Harvard Law, about to graduate. She like follows a good path and like stays on it. Whereas like I'm a little bit more adventurous, right? Like if everyone does the same thing, I'm like, what's different,
Can you recall your childhood with your sister in Denmark or like in China?
We didn't really spend much time together because my parents arranged the exact same 3-country tour for us, right? So like we're 3 years apart. She did it 3 years after me. Denmark, China, and then the States. It wasn't until I think middle school for me, high school for me, where like we actually lived together in the same place in LA. I think my last year of high school was her first year of high school. I would like drive her to school every day. But aside from that, our childhoods didn't overlap that much. But I think like we have a good relationship these days. I think it was also one of those pre-planned things where my parents were like, oh yeah, it would be nice for you to have a sister so you have at least someone to, a family member when we're gone. And I'm like, oh, this is a little depressing to think about, right? In hindsight, it's like, yeah, who else would I trust, right?
Yeah.
Like if I really need something, it's my parents, it's my grandparents, it's my sister, my co-founder Calvin's like really good friend. There's not that many people, right?
Yeah. Have you ever faced any identity crisis by moving around, living different culture, free continent actually? Like,
yeah.
So what's the upside and downsides?
I think like moving around, it lets you appreciate these cultures, but it also like there's part of that muscle where you gotta like learn how to make new friends and learn how to adapt to a new environment. I think the hardest thing I struggled with really is where from the western and eastern side do I land, right? It's like when I'm in China, people think like, oh, there's this 美国人, right? Or they weren't even 美国人, they're like 丹麦人 because I was from Denmark. And they're just like, this guy's weird, right? And then like when I was in Denmark, I was like the only one with black hair. And at school, in my preschool, kindergarten, and like I wondered why it was so weird, right? And my family was so weird. They also just did, different things differently. So preschool, you would nap outside in the winter to like harden your body. That was part of the growing up process. I would just get really sick every single time they did it. Doctor is just like, oh yeah, drink ice water.
Exactly.
And then my parents like, ice water? We drink hot water. Just like little things like that where it's just like, okay, am I east or am I west? If you stay in the middle, it's like lukewarm water. Like, I guess I can do that too. Right? When I was young, I didn't think that deep about like who I was. It's not really until you're like 8, 9, 10, the teenage years where like, who am I? How do I blend in with my friends? How do I be cool, right? Or whatever. I feel like I'm in the middle, but there are always like people on either side that cultural influences, they do things differently, right? It wasn't until when I first moved to Austin that I was like, wow, the white side is I can't go too far on the white side, and I can't go too far on the Asian side either. Good example of that was like, I met some friends at a bar and I was like, oh, there's a sushi place next door. Do you guys want sushi? And they're like, what is sushi? And I was like, that struck me. I was like, what? And it wasn't even like real sushi. It was like California roll. There's like avocados in the middle. There wasn't raw fish. And they're just like, oh, that's not really, what we want. I was like, oh. That's what kind of made me realize I appreciate LA a lot. It's like a cultural melting pot. But then also like there are different regions they're like mini town cities within LA that are like different ethnicities, right?
Yeah.
Glendale's Armenian, Persians are in Beverly Hills, Chinese people are in like, the 626 areas where my parents are, like Little Thai Town, Japantown, whatever. So you can go to a neighborhood, you can get the best food ever of that specific, people, right? And then like you can drive, 5 minutes out and get a different thing, right? I grew up on tacos. I love tacos. And like that's something that quite isn't Asian or Western, but you're just like, okay, this is also kind of like a multicultural thing that I got from LA, right?
Where do you find home the most?
I think LA is probably still home at some point because I spent so many of my years there. And every time I go back, I'm like, yeah, traffic sucks. It's sunny every single day. Oh no, there's no variance in weather, right? Yeah. But then at the same time, there's that like aspect of like home where I'm like, I fit in because I can have all these different cultures in one place. And like people don't really judge me for being too white, too Asian, too anything. Everyone's on this like different spectrum, right?
Yeah. Have you been judged in Denmark or China?
There were times when I think my parents had to be, a little bit more careful on like who I hung out with in school. Because like Denmark also has this thing, they want ethnic people to like assimilate into their community. You're not gonna ever find a Chinatown in Denmark. You're not gonna ever find like a little Pakistan or whatever, even though there's tons of Middle Eastern people there because they want to disperse people into different neighborhoods and kind of like homogenize everyone into the Nordic, like Danish culture, right? So I think in that respect, I vaguely remember some parents not wanting to like, come over to our place or me going to their place in Denmark when I was really young. I don't remember too many details now, but I think like that was a little bit, upsetting, like when I was really young, I didn't understand, like I want to go to their house, I think in the reverse, and maybe this is also like a little bit of, foreigner privilege was when I was in Shanghai and like they treated me differently at school all the time because I was just like this person who came from Denmark. I was going to only be in China for X amount of years and everyone knew that I was not from there. And like my grandparents had to get some special permission for me to like go to a local school.
Oh, really?
Like they didn't want me to like go to Shanghai American school or Shanghai European school because then what's the point? Learn some local culture, learn some Chinese. That's where they saw the value. So it was like it's a different like kind of instead of being looked down upon, it's like a celebrated aspect of my identity, right? These are just two facets of the same thing.
Crazy. So like grew up as a third culture kid. Do you find Taipei blockchain, the 不知道 is like kind of this mix of community? For me, like when I see 不知道 or to be honest, the reason why I come back for Taipei blockchain week is just because I think this certain group of people is like who I can talk to and I can give opinion from different aspects and the people would accept it. I live in Europe, they don't understand my Asian part fully. Yeah. And then when I come back to Taiwan is so foreign to me right now.
Yeah.
And then I struggle so much. And for you, what's your reason to join this community? And what is 不知道? What is,
I think like 不知道 is like a Web3 community centered around Taiwanese culture, celebrating and connecting people in Taiwan. And Taipei Blockchain Week is an extension of that spirit where a bunch of people from the States, people from yourself, like from Europe and elsewhere. It's not just, these centers. There are some people from like Australia, Southeast Asia, Asia, everyone just coming together and building up a community sharing knowledge around like what is Web3? How are you doing it in Europe? How am I doing in the States? Right? Like, are there any tips you can share? Like, who can I connect you with? Who can you connect me with? That's all it is at the end of the day for like a lot of these business development development, exchange of ideas, right? I think when I see blockchain ecosystems, especially in Asia, they're very, very hyper-focused on each country specifically, right? I think when I look at Vietnam, when I look at Thailand, Philippines, the ecosystems it's very homogenous, I would say. Like a Thai person would not be playing in a Philippine game. And I think we see that in Taiwan a little bit too. A lot of the Taiwanese players here don't really want to expand abroad, and they don't really want to welcome like foreign knowledge, or like they just don't know how to do it. Maybe they're afraid, maybe they don't have the right, connections. And I think that's where TBW comes in. We invite speakers from abroad, we invite sponsors from abroad, mentors, and we also invite the local people to come demonstrate their products, show their knowledge, and see how we can improve the ecosystem in and around Taiwan.
And were you one of the founding member of 부지다?
I was not the founding member because I didn't find out about it until after they minted. So I got in on the second round, which is based on contribution. We were trying to see what is more effective for membership, but basically we don't want you to just be an inactive member of 부지다, right? People should be attending events, contributing to the broader ecosystem in and around Taiwan, right?
I guess you find a sense of belonging then. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, right? People just I was here for Taipei Blockchain Week last year, and I think from the people we met here who introduced us to more people, who then introduced us to more people, we grew a big chunk of our network from Taiwan. At least the business side in Japan, I would say at least half of the introductions, deals, things like that came from us attending Taipei Blockchain Week at some point, meeting people, meeting more people, right? People who are builders and are creators in this space know other creators. When you empower people to introduce each other, you're not going to introduce me a scam, right? In blockchain, there's a lot of this, right? Or sometimes you meet people who they want quick money. It's quick money versus do you want to actually build? And people who build know other people who build and want to hang out with more people who build. The other side, obviously has their own community as well.
Wow, crazy. And do you have such a community in the States too?
I'm not in part of any in the States. I do know that there are a couple. They are focused a lot more on the DeFi or the tradability side of things, right? I think what our company needs really is these manufacturing, distribution, bigger brands and partnerships. People down to try new things, right? With fashion and with blockchain, that's where we really tapped into Japan for. Was people there really love the technological aspect of hey, this is new. I can do this and this and that. It's wearable. What was funny was some Japanese guy really didn't believe that our tags were washable and dryable and pretty hard to break. Yeah. So this guy on Twitter in full Japanese was I washed this shirt 10 times.
No way.
I dried it.
Wait, is it this one?
No. It was something we produced specifically for the Japanese market, right? It was OP Sumo Club first drop.
Wow.
And then he tweeted, he was check mark, great.
I love their due diligence.
Yeah. I was I'm pretty confident in my product, but now I'm more confident.
Fully and truly. Yeah. Okay, so if you can choose it again, or you can do everything all over again, what would you do differently?
Company-wise or life-wise?
Life-wise.
Oh my God. I wouldn't have changed my trajectory that much. I think. The painful things that you go through, right, it builds who you are. And I think I definitely was a product of that, right? I appreciated all the different mentors I had in different companies that got me up to this stage in terms of my life experiences. Wow, all the friends along the way, some of the enemies, I appreciated what my parents, the choices they made for me, right? Prior to coming to Taiwan, I think 2020, I was just why am I ever going to use Chinese? Never expected myself to spend a couple months in a Chinese speaking country ever, And then when I get here, I'm oh shoot, I can't read Fanti. Because China, I learned Genti, right? And so slowly picked it up.
Oh, can you read?
I can read a good amount now, right? The newspaper, not so much, but food menus, things like that, I can more or less.
Survival skills.
Yeah. Exactly, right. But now the problem is where's the good tacos, right? I found one shop.
Really? Do we have good tacos?
Masa.
Okay, show me about that.
Yeah, it's good.
Good. Legend.
Yeah.
Okay, then finally, thank you so much. And where can people find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best place for me professionally. Daniel Duan, Duan is the last name. Otherwise, like I'm on Twitter, I am on Instagram, they are Dan Duan. Reach out if you want to chat about like NFTs, culture, you know, or even just like hang out in Taiwan.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, then thank you. And I guess I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. I don't even know if I will put the last part.